We want to see great racing. We want to see wheel-to-wheel action and drama and things that are unexpected happening that affects things. That's sport, really, isn't it? That's what we watch sport for. And then if you correct everything slightly that goes wrong and manipulate it, it feels a lot more contrived and a lot less dramatic, and then maybe even a lot less interesting to watch.
Let's talk about McLaren and their situation that we had this weekend. Before we get on to the big talking point, Piers, how do you rate their performance? Do you think they were surprised to not be able to get past Max Verstappen so easily?
I think they'll be disappointed, no doubt, because they've had the dominant car all year. And then, somewhat surprisingly, they knew they weren't going to have the advantage here that they have at other circuits. However, Verstappen finishing 20 seconds up the road, I think they'll be disappointed with that, and they'll definitely be scratching their heads because it wasn't exactly a faultless weekend, either in terms of the car racing or the strategy, really, was it?
No, not at all. So let's just go back to qualifying. We already talked about Max Verstappen and how fantastic he was and how he put in the perfect lap, breaking the lap speed, average speed record to qualify first. Still good qualifying from them. Oscar Piastri, I think, was first at one point, and then Lando Norris went quicker before Max smashed them out of the water. But starting second and third, I thought Lando Norris actually got a pretty good start, almost better than Max Verstappen. But Oscar Piastri struggled a little bit and got in the background of that and then got overtaken by Charles Leclerc.
Well, it just shows how important qualifying is in your starting position, because Norris was able to get away with Max while Piastri was fighting with other drivers. Ultimately, did some pretty tasty moves, didn't he? I mean, you spoke about it briefly, but the move around the outside of Lesmo 1 from Piastri was top draw. I don't think it really got a huge amount of attention, but it was really top draw. And then once the McLarens cleared everyone else and Leclerc's tyres fell away, then Piastri was there or thereabouts, but just didn't have the advantage of pace over Norris to be able to overtake him on track, but then managed to get in front of him due to a funny little situation in the pits.
We're going to get onto that. Going into this race weekend, though, as a 34-point leader in the championship over your teammate, do you think that as the race panned out, Oscar Piastri would have been happy to sit behind Lando Norris, knowing that if it finished that way, it would only be a 3-point swing?
Absolutely. I think actually, I don't think he would have thought this weekend went too badly. Yes, he finished behind Norris, but I think I did the maths, and if they finish 1-2, I think we spoke about this last week, didn't we? If they finish 1-2 for the rest of the season, Norris has to beat him 7-2. And that's assuming they do finish 1-2, and there's a bigger points difference between first and second than there is between second and third. I think it's 25-18 and then 18-15. So every time that they're not winning races, it actually helps. Ironically, if they're not winning races, it actually helps Oscar Piastri, because it means that Norris has to finish more places ahead of Piastri. So as much as Piastri will be disappointed to have been beaten by Norris, actually in the championship, not terrible.
No, not at all. So let's talk about it then. Lap 46 it was that Oscar Piastri came in, and they were basically trying to stay out as long as possible, assuming there'd be a safety car, I'm guessing, because Max pitted a little bit earlier and we saw Max's tyres were blistering up there. They were going through some serious strain. But in the end, they decided, okay, 53 laps, we've done 46. So they managed to last those tyres till 46 laps into the race. Oscar came in. They were sort of saying to him that they were bringing him in early to, I guess, protect from Charles Leclerc behind. And then on the next lap was when Lando Norris came in, and he had a 5.9 second stop, which is kind of nearly 4 seconds slower than you'd want, really, given that they can do pit stops in about 1.9 seconds if they are right on the money. So, maybe a little bit less than that. And the front left wheel didn't go on. It was sticky. They managed to get out, and we heard the radio message actually on the TV broadcast, and I don't know if you saw this because I know you were at the Sky HQ and you might see things differently, but the broadcast message to Oscar that explained what they were going to do and how Lando was going to feed out in front of him to allow him to defend from behind came out as Lando Norris came out behind Oscar Piastri, which obviously wasn't the plan at all. When you saw that happen, did you kind of think, well, okay, I feel like some shenanigans are going to go on here?
I just think it's an awkward situation, isn't it? It's super awkward because McLaren have effectively made a blunder, which has made their team drivers swap positions, and then they're having to awkwardly be like, Oscar, would you mind awfully if you could just let Lando back through so that it makes us look less bad? Do you know what? It's just really weird. And for me, it doesn't feel like World Championship racing. It feels like a school sports day, well, Timmy tripped, so can you let him back through? And here's your little sticker for taking part. It's just a bit, I don't know. It doesn't scream motorsport to me, which I think is a shame. I know a lot of people are saying that it doesn't look good for the sport and blah, blah, blah. I understand why McLaren did it, but I don't think I would do it. And I think it's a similar situation with McLaren that we're seeing almost with the FIA and the stewards and the race. What do they call it? The directive on racing and positioning and overtaking. That they're trying to almost quantify and write down in Papaya Rules how they should go racing with like the things that have been unwritten rules for years. And it's quite hard to actually quantify those things. And I really wonder if they've already written down and agreed what happens in that situation, or whether they had to make that decision on the fly. Because if they had to make that decision on the fly, you then can't think of the ramifications. Because let's say that Charles Leclerc was in between them or right with them, and it actually Leclerc was right behind Piastri and Norris dropped behind Piastri. Would they have asked Piastri to drop behind Leclerc and Norris? Would that then, they're making these situations with the luxury that there's no one around them, but they then have to almost apply the same logic in future if the complete opposite happens, where Piastri's ahead, the pit stop's bad, it drops him behind Norris, but there's other cars involved. Then that really makes it awkward, because then almost it makes the difference in the championship bigger, and that's what they're trying to protect, is like the situation in the championship and make it fair for their drivers. But I see the pit stops as racing like luck, really. Yes, it's the same team, but ultimately over a season, each driver's going to have 2 or 3 bad pit stops by their team, or 1 or 2. The team try and get as few as possible, but ultimately what comes around goes around. And then now they've backed themselves into a corner where they kind of have to do the same again, but the situation might not be the same. And I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me. If I was McLaren, I would have had a contract in the contract, like, this is the situation. If it's a fight between the 2 drivers in the championship, these are the situations in which we will intervene. These are the situations in which we won't intervene. And I would say team mistakes, I would have something like top line. The team always does their best for both drivers, but they cannot guarantee equality in all circumstances. E.G. pit stops. Because how, like, I just don't get it. Because it sets a terrible precedent, and it makes Lando feel awkward because he's taken a position he didn't want. The Tifosi were booing him on the podium. I didn't really like that, but I can understand why. And then Piastri's there like, well, I've just given up a position for nothing. Like, ultimately, I did everything I could, and I've got in front. Why is the team now giving it back to Lando? So it's just awkward all round.
But look, let's summarize this, because, talking about contracts and different stipulations in there, from my perspective, Lando Norris did nothing wrong. His team messed up in the pit stop. They made him come out behind Oscar. So for them to let Lando go through seems fair, because obviously Lando didn't make a mistake. So I know it's the team, and that's fine. They can sort that out within the team. But from Oscar's perspective, he was going to come out third anyway, and Lando deserved to be second. But you're saying that you feel that Piastri should have just been able to keep that position because it happened in the pits?
Okay, well, devil's advocate here. This is a bit of a stretch, but using your logic, the first race of the season in Australia, the team left the drivers out on slicks when it started raining. They both went off at the second last corner, didn't they? They both went through the gravel and the grass. Lando tiptoed back on the road. Oscar made exactly the same mistake on exactly the same lap, on the same strategy, spun round, got stuck, finished way behind Lando Norris, and that gave Norris a big advantage at the start of the championship. But they didn't ask Lando to drop back and finish behind Piastri at that point. And ultimately, I think people often forget that the points at the start of the year are equally weighted to the points at the end of the year. But teams and drivers and people always say, oh, well, they should make this decision because of the point situation. But you forget what's happened like race 1, 2, and 3. That's just as important as points at the final race of the season. And this is one, I think is a bit weird as well, when drivers try not to get involved in championship battles and let one through or not. And by not getting involved, you're getting involved. So I think by the logic of, you're saying that they need to try and keep it fair for their drivers, they're almost intervening when they should let the racing happen. The team should do their best and give equality of effort, but not give equality of outcome, because you can't always control the outcome. And as I mentioned, if the situation was different at the final race of the season, are they going to then ask Norris to swap back even if he's in a championship position? I don't see that happening.
So with the Papaya Rules, what happens if Oscar Piastri finishes 2 points behind Lando Norris come Abu Dhabi later this year.
Exactly. This is exactly it. This is my point. Like, it just doesn't sit right with me. I've been involved in motorsport since I was 9 years old. I've done a lot of karting, a lot of, of the building formula. I did British Formula 3, and it's absolutely cutthroat. You really need to be ruthless and take every opportunity. Other drivers' misfortune is your fortune. You just got to take what you can, because it's sport. It's elite sport. The margins are so fine. You could take every advantage. I'm not saying they should go out there and be unsporting, because I don't believe in that either. But like, if someone else has misfortune, that's just the way it goes, whether they created it or not. And I don't see that in this race. I don't see that in McLaren. I feel like they need to be a bit more hard-nosed, because if they get into a championship battle with another team, let's say Red Bull, for example, who we know can be pretty hardball on things, they're gonna lose out. It's a weakness for the team. I see it as.
Do you think that this will happen? Well, I mean, this Papaya Rules, I'm sick of saying the word Papaya Rules, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing the term Papaya Rules. This can't happen next year, right? Because one of them's going to win the championship this year. Are we going to just have this for the entirety of Lando and Oscar, assuming they're going to be as dominant for the next few years or so? And obviously it all could change next year. Are we just going to be stuck with this, where every week we're like, oh, I don't know who's going to come first, second or third, because McLaren might manipulate it in the favour of what the big narrative is?
It's a weird one. It really is. I don't know who's in charge of making these situations and those decisions at McLaren, but it is a bit of a weird one. It doesn't, as I said like earlier on, it doesn't scream professional sport to me, and it does make things a little bit disappointing. I think David Coulthard, I was watching the commentary that David Coulthard was on, and he made a point that it's like, this is a world championship. Like, there shouldn't really be niceties here, and I agree with that. We want to see great racing. We want to see wheel-to-wheel action, and drama and things that are unexpected happening that affects things. That's sport, really, isn't it? That's what we watch sport for. And then if you correct everything slightly that goes wrong and manipulate it, it feels a lot more contrived and a lot less dramatic, and then maybe even a lot less interesting to watch.
Well, look, I think when it comes down to it, Oscar Piastri did sound a little bit miffed when they suggested that he did that. But as we've already said, he knows it's only a 3-point swing. He still has a 31-point lead in the championship with 8 races to go. So he's in a pretty good place. It'll be interesting to see how they match up at Azerbaijan in 2 weeks' time.